Have you ever been on a ghost train ride at the fun fair, and as the lights dimmed and you were hurled around in the dark in that small little carriage, were you just a little bit frightened? Well, in this episode of the Y-Files, we've got a true-life ghost train story for you. They used to say that if you had a job on the railways, it was a job for life. But perhaps this story proves that it could be a job after you die as well. We're at the Telford Steam Railway, where strange things have been going on in the engine sheds. Now, Paul Hughes and Steve Lawley have had some rather strange experiences. They pick up the story.
On that occasion, when we were working here together, we were both working down the far end of the shed on one of the engines down there, and working away quite merrily. Late one evening, most of the other members had actually left for the evening, and we just heard the door open, and then somebody start to walk in.
From that, all you could hear is steps coming around the side of the loco, alongside the loco, and then going up to the steps. And as they go up to the top of the steps, they just stop all of a sudden.
And once they'd stopped, we come to investigate who'd actually come in. And we walked down, and there's nobody here. Strange, you definitely heard somebody come into the shed. You'd heard the door open and the footsteps walk in. I remember the first time that I heard it when I was here. I'd actually borrowed the keys and was working on my own, and I was working the far side of the shed, cleaning the crew room out, and was waiting for one of the mates to come in. And first of all, I heard him come in. I thought it was him coming in. Come across again, nobody here. This continued for about half an hour on about 4 occasions, and in the end he found me waiting outside by the door in hysterics. So what's the matter with you?
I've also heard the strange steps by myself. There's been nobody else in the shed at all, and this has actually been in the daytime, and I've actually come into the crew room just to get some things that I needed, heard the door go, and as most people do, you hear the door go and you go and have a look, and I've actually climbed over the engine and had a look. There's actually been nobody there. One of the experiences I've had is actually being late at night, around about midnight. Paul and I have just got ready to actually lock up and go home for the evening. This is on a Tuesday night, and we've actually heard the door go again. This is around midnight, and we've just come to have a look to see if anyone's there, which is very unlikely at that time, and there isn't. And it's very strange. Nobody knows what it is.
Now, if you think that Paul and Steve are alone in seeing these apparitions, you'd be very wrong. Wendy Reynolds, who also works here, has also had some very strange experiences. Here's her stories.
Well, the first experience I had, which was on a hot sunny day, the drought was on at the time, so I came in to get a drink from the crew room, and I heard these very heavy footsteps coming from the front of the loco shed. And I come out to have a look from the gap over at the crew room over there, and I looked and I saw this figure of a man dressed in an old-fashioned fireman's hat, overalls and very heavy boots. I shouted, "Paul, is that you?" He looked at me. His face was all fuzzed out like a bad picture, but I could tell there was black all over his face. He looked at me, walked through the side door and then disappeared. The second experience, we came for a board meeting in the crew room. My husband walked in to switch the electric lights on, And as I walked in, the figure was standing by the wooden door with his leg bent upright and his arms folded, and he was admiring the sentinel. And I said, "Excuse me, what are you doing here?" He looked at me, smiled, and just melted into the doorway.
Now, Paul Noakes is another member of the Trust here, and he can remember ghost stories about this place going back years, going back, in fact, to his childhood. But he's had more recent experiences too.
As a child, being here most of my life, we used to play and investigate and discover things on the railway as it was then. And there was another shed about then at the time, a big area, and we used to mess about, and I actually witnessed a ghost in the shed with my brother. We saw the shadow come from one wall straight through the other, and it was very cold, and this was in midsummer, in the 70s, early 70s. Very hot outside, but very cold inside. And all we could do was actually say, well, let's get out of here and get as far away as we can. That's all we could do.
Now, so many people were having strange experiences here that it was thought a good idea to perhaps bring in some clairvoyants to try and get to the bottom of exactly what was going on. So that's what they did. Joan and Keith James were both clairvoyants, and I asked them, what did they discover about this place?
Well, we were asked to come down and have a look around here to see if we could find anything, because people were having different experiences. And so, of course, we did. And this engine at the time was outside, and we did pick something up with this engine, and also the one at the far end, which was parked here at the time. So
there was a gentleman on this particular engine, like Paul, very similar in build, but slightly smaller. Obviously a bit more older than him, and he was standing on the footplate of the particular engine.
This one.
And this one. And then there was a noise behind us, just like a footsteps sort of noise, and then we was asked to go out and explore around the other area, and on the station there was quite a few people mulling around on the station.
Well, the person on this engine here, this was the fireman, and he'd been there since the train was taken out of service, and he wanted it rebuilding, really, from what we can understand. And the one at the far end was a driver. But on the station, as I say, there's just ordinary people just milling around.
I remember one name, and that was just Joseph, and that was all.
And they just really want to see this going, up and going. They were around, you see, when the ordinary steam engines used to come originally, and now this is all started up as a trust. I expect they're here to see if everything goes strongly, you know.
These particular two are not really ready to move on yet until they see what's going to be achieved with this particular place. And then they'll probably just then move on to the other vibration, into the world where they should be.
This was their life at the time, you see, and it's still their life now. They don't really realise that they've gone over, some of them. They want to be here, and that's where they'll be.
It's often said that people, when they die, their ghosts will hang around because they still love or feel protective for people who are still alive. Maybe what this story proves is that sometimes those ghosts don't just hang around for people, but for objects, in this case, a steam engine. Now, maybe this ghost is waiting for the steam engine to be fully restored. After all, he probably spent his whole life working on it. And then perhaps he can take one final ride on it before he disappears to a station maybe up there.